You hear it all the time. Protein builds muscle. And in most cases, that's not the full truth. Because if protein alone builds muscle, you can just drink protein shakes all day, sit on your couch, and get jacked. But you can't. Because muscle doesn't grow from protein. It grows from unaccustomed stimulus, taken to the point of overload. Protein only supports the process. But food companies figured out years ago, if they can convince you that protein is the cause of muscle growth, they can sell you anything, as long as they add a few extra grams of protein. And it's a real problem. Protein is everywhere now. Protein cookies, protein cereal, protein chips, even protein water, which is absolutely ridiculous. But here's what no one tells you. It's not about your health. It's about marketing. And it's deceptive marketing at that. Here's how they get you. Slap the word protein onto a label and suddenly junk food gets what's called a health halo. And people start thinking, well, if it has protein, it must be good for me. Protein builds muscle and I need to build muscle. So I should definitely buy this. But adding a few grams of protein to ultra processed foods doesn't make it healthy. It just makes it easier to sell. Not enough protein is seldom a problem. It never was. The problem is thinking that more protein equals better results in terms of building muscle. Because your body doesn't build muscle from hype. You only build muscle from real stimulus, real recovery, and then just enough protein from real food. And that misunderstanding is why so many people feel stuck. They're doing everything they're told is right. They say eat more protein, so they're eating more protein. They track their macros, they make sure their protein intake is high, and they still don't see any meaningful change in their bodies. And you won't unless you really understand how protein works. Here's the thing. Protein is perhaps the most misunderstood nutrient in the fitness industry. And that goes all the way back to the bodybuilding magazine days. People always talk about how much protein you need to build muscle, as if it somehow creates muscle. And it doesn't. And here's the part that no one's talking about. Most of the bodybuilders and fitness influencers pushing higher protein intakes are either on steroids or on TRT. And to make things worse, they tend to be sponsored by companies selling protein supplements or selling their own protein supplements. Let that sink in for a while. And bear in mind that someone on steroids can use more protein than a natural athlete ever could. And they can grow with far less stimulus. So their high protein messages and high protein advice reflects their reality and helps line their pockets while emptying yours. That's why I never accepted sponsorships from any protein supplement companies or any protein foods, as I've always lived by the precept that to whom much is given, much is expected. And I'm here to help you cut through the nonsense and share with you my decades of experience as a natural bodybuilder and someone who's coached over 1,000 men and women over the past 35 years. And I have to say, as a natural athlete, that you have to understand completely that protein doesn't build muscle. It only supports muscle growth after the correct signal is applied. Lack of muscle mass or difficulty putting on muscle is not a nutrition problem. It's a stimulus problem. Muscle grows, like I said, in response to unaccustomed stimulus, taken to the point of overload, followed by adequate recovery. That process is biological and it applies to everyone. But what most people do instead is increase their protein intake without changing the stimulus. So protein intake goes up, and when you do so, your calories go up, but the training stays the same. So over time, you don't build any extra muscle, and your body fat will tend to increase, and then the frustration sets in. This confusion becomes even more damaging as people get older, because regardless of what anybody tells you, more protein will not rebuild muscle at any age. No stimulus, no growth. It's just that simple. Because instead of fixing the signal, they start blaming age. You hear words like slowing metabolism or muscle loss with aging, and more men and women are being told that the solution is eating more protein. Now, there is some truth to age-related muscle loss. It's called sarcopenia. And sarcopenia is the gradual loss of muscle mass, strength, and physical function over time. And yes, it's real, absolutely. But it's not caused by aging alone. You see, as we age, several things change. The connection between nerves and muscles become less efficient. Muscle repair systems slow down. Inflammation increases slightly and recovery tends to take longer. All of those can contribute to muscle loss if the body stops receiving a strong enough signal. And here's the part that matters the most. Protein alone does not and cannot stop sarcopenia. Muscle is not preserved by nutrients. Muscle is preserved by usage. Either you use it or you lose it. So you need training that challenges your system and tells your body that this tissue is still required. And it gets even worse. Older men, especially women, aren't just told to eat more protein, they're told not to train too hard and focus instead on low intensity activities because of cortisol, because of recovery, because it's not safe anymore. So what happens? They eat more protein, they move less, and they lose more muscle as the years go by while gaining more body fat. Here's the deal. I've trained men and women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, even 90s, and none of them built muscle by just eating more protein. They built it by training hard and embracing intensity, not avoiding it. Because muscle mass with age isn't a protein problem, it's a stimulus problem. And without hard resistance training, extra protein doesn't create muscle. It can't. It just creates expensive urine. So, how much do you really need? And is it age dependent? Here's my story. I was able to go from 125 pounds to 198.5 pounds, consuming only 120 to 125 grams of protein per day. And since that's really hard for a lot of people to envision, this is what a diet looks like. I put on the most amount of muscle over the course of my entire career, eating only that much protein. And that's a lot less than the 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight that the fitness influencers and gym bros advocate, and those trying to sell you protein supplements. And it's not just me, because most of us from other parts of the world understand completely the fact that you don't need lots of protein to grow, because in most countries, you simply don't have access to that much protein. But we still grow. And what I found, having coached hundreds of men and women over the past 35 years, is that you only need to consume 0.6 grams of protein per pound of body weight to build muscle. That's it. Higher than that always produce diminishing returns at any age. And if you have to shift towards a form of training that's going to allow you to push hard without breaking your body, because injuries, not age, are what tends to stop you from training hard and keeping muscle. That's where high intensity training becomes essential. Not reckless intensity, but intelligent intensity. Low volume, high effort, and enough recovery after delivering the strongest possible signal for adaptation. Because the more muscle you can build and maintain, the less you'll be affected by sarcopenia. Muscle is protection. Muscle is resilient. I'm 51 years old, just about turned 52, and I can still lift just about what I lifted in my 20s with no overuse injuries. And that's not genetics, as it's the same for my long-term clients. It's not hormones, as I'm not on TRT, and it's definitely not extreme protein intake. It's how I train. And like I said, it works for everyone. Naturally intense, high-intensity training was built for natural athletes by a natural athlete. Short workouts, high intensity, constant variety, focus on recovery, no unnecessary volume, and no grinding through pain. That's how you build muscle and keep it long-term. And if you want to learn more about Naturally Intense or you want to join us online, links are below. So if you're frustrated with your progress, stop chasing protein numbers. Fix the stimulus. And please, you need to build as much muscle as your body allows, male or female, and then hold on to it. Because muscle doesn't just change the way you look, it changes how you age. Protein just supports the process, but training drives it. And your longevity depends on how intelligently you apply both those factors. Thanks so much for tuning in. Know that I believe in you, and as always, Excelsior.